Hey everyone, it's Mike Carey with The One Good Reason. Appreciate you guys being patient with us trying to get set up here. We were trying something new, something called cross-posting, where this video would basically be going live simultaneously on my guests page. And we were having some technical difficulties. We just now figured it out, so we're running a little bit late, about 11 minutes behind, but I'm going to go ahead and try to get Mr. Palm added in so we can go ahead and get into the discussion, because this is really just going to be probably about 10 minutes or less of a quick summary of our views on discussing omniscience. So we'll kind of see where it goes, but I'm really just trying to make it 10 minutes or less. Really have some other things to take care of. But let me go ahead and jump right into this. So without any further ado, I'm live now. Hey Mike, what's going on? Appreciate you joining, man. Appreciate the patience. It's been one of those days, man. It's been one of those days. Gotta love it though. So I just sent a message over to Mr. Palm. I think this is his first time doing a Facebook Live invite though, so I'm gonna try to see if maybe I can tag him. There's always something. Let me see. He says he's watching now, no notification. Hey, Mr. Palm, I just allowed you to request to join, so you should be able to shoot a request to me. That's probably going to be the easiest way here, because I'm not able to tag you. Do you see? I'm assuming, are you using the phone or are you using as like a desktop or a laptop? Which of those three? Or maybe there's a mysterious fourth option. Just waiting for the text information to come in. He says he's watching live, there's no notification. Let me see. How can I add you? Hopefully he didn't just, he's using his PC. Okay. Hey, appreciate the like, man. Appreciate the support. So when I go to my guests, I see Mike and I see the other guests, and I'm able to send them a request, but for you, I'm not able to do it. I wonder if that's because you're on your PC, sir. Ironically, I wanted this to be about 10 minutes or less. We've kind of put 3 minutes into it. So let's see. Yeah, because I could literally add Mike Holt right now, and we could have a conversation about, whatever, but I'm not able to find you in that list. It's one of those things, sir. Are you able to change to your cell phone? You have a smartphone, I assume? Yeah, I'm sorry it's working out like this. Because I had a couple of things I wanted to get into, but the what is this called? It's Murphy's Law, right? If there's two ways to do something and one ends in a catastrophe, right? Somebody will do it that way. Do you guys have to be Facebook friends in order for it to work? I was thinking about that, Mike. I don't know. You know what I'll do in the season of or in the spirit of doing this debate. Yeah, let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and shoot you the request, and we'll see if that makes everything a-okay. So I just went ahead and shot you the friend request. Right, we're gonna try this hypothesis and see. There we go. Mr. Palm wants to be in your video. There he is. Oh, and now he's gone. Hey, try to send it again. It worked. It popped up. I was too slow to grab it. Try that again. There he is. And I'm going to... There he is. Excellent.
Hey,
Science is amazing. Hey, what's going on? It's Jesse, right?
it is Jesse. Yeah, it's Mike, right?
Yep, that's correct. Do you prefer Mr. Palm or Jesse?
No, you can call me Jesse. Yeah, I've been referring to you as Mike to my friend, so
Oh,
nice to meet you.
nice to meet you. Appreciate your assistance in getting this cross-posting set up. So I'm a cross-posting version, as you know, as you are as well. So this is our first time, guys, doing this. So we really appreciate your patience. I know you guys wanted to get started about 15 minutes ago, but anyway, here we are. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. If you could just before we discuss the contention that you had with the omniscience, the viewpoint that you're coming from, as far as I understand, is that you're a Calvinist. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a Calvinist, a Reformed theology, Christianity, theist. Yeah.
Okay. And before we kick off the contention that you have, what is your definition of omniscience?
So omniscience is a total and exhaustive knowledge. So anything that can be known is known by that omniscience, that omni portion, just total, complete, exhaustive knowledge.
Okay, just make sure I understand what you're saying. You said everything that can be known.
Yes, but within the definition of omniscience, so anything that can be known is anything that, I mean, so you might be able to work a way around that to say that, well, what if it's an unknown, unknowable knowledge that exists? Well,
Uh,
it's kind of defeating the definition of an omniscience at that point. Because if there's something outside of that omniscience, then it's not true omniscience. It's a self-negation. So if
okay.
you're talking about omniscience, then it has to, by definition, know everything.
So let me use an example because I just want to make sure that I have your definition locked in. If I'm in a grocery store and I see that there's a trail of sugar on the floor, and I say, you know, I want to follow this trail of sugar to see who's making this mess. And I start following the trail, and it takes me around the aisle and down the next aisle and back to where I started. And I say, what the hell? I went in a circle. And I look at my shopping cart, and I notice my own sugar bag has a hole in it, and that I was causing the mess. In your definition of the omniscience, is your God, in that definition, knowing that, hey, Mike's causing the mess, or is he knowing that Mike knows he's causing the mess?
So your knowledge is separate from God's. So
Okay.
God knows that you're causing the mess, and whether or not you know that you're causing the mess, God also knows. It's
So he
just a
knows both.
reality of fact.
So both. He knows I'm causing the mess, and he knows I know.
If you know, yes. If you know you're causing the mess, then he knows you know. If you
So
don't
he
know you're
knows.
causing the mess,
Okay.
you don't.
I just wanted to be sure about that. So he knows that I know. So he knows my internal thoughts. He knows what it's. So he would know what it's like to be me knowing that I caused the mess.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear about that. So yes. So let's go ahead and jump into it then. What was the issue that you took with my breakdown, basically my issue with omniscience?
So it wasn't. So if I recall, because we've had several conversations back and forth on several different topics since I originally watched that video, and that video was it was 50. I think it was 50 minutes long, if I recall correctly. It was rather lengthy, and so there was a lot to that. But essentially, it was something basically like, did God create his own capacity to choose, or was that choice, or perhaps it was the options outside of himself? Were those options like imposed upon him? Choice that he chose to create, was it derived from within, or was it derived from externally? Does that make sense? So I cannot
Well,
recall exactly.
that's all right. That's all right. So that discussion was about the origin of choice,
Mhm.
and I was asking that person, did your God create choice? That conversation was supposed to specifically be about choice. And the reason why it became lengthy is because we had derailed basically, and we went off into other topics. Um, so the video that you had specifically mentioned on that Facebook post on the page, you referenced the month of February, right, of 2019. That discussion took place September of 2018. So I think what you were talking about was an excerpt. There was a 1 minute, so not so lengthy, right? A 60-second excerpt from that 49-minute video, where I
Yeah,
broke down omniscience in 1 minute, where I said something along the lines of, if you're, in the definition I understand it with omniscience, right? I basically said, if your God's going to know its own future, like it knows, between two options, right? Pepsi and Coke. And I said, if it knows it's going to drink Coke, when it's presented with that opportunity, if it says, even though I knew I was going to drink the Coke, I still have the option, I'm going to drink Pepsi, then it really didn't know its own future, because it would have foreseen that it was going to drink Pepsi.
yeah. So that's a very good contention. It's an actually very interesting contention. But
Mhm.
the way that I think that you would have to look at that is like, so when, for example, God is then given the opportunity, the time comes around for him to choose to drink the Coke or not. The other attribute that goes hand in hand with omniscience as an incommunicable attribute is that of eternality. So there's never a point in time exactly that God goes from point A to point B. He doesn't really progress in a timeline. Comes to two options and then chooses to pick two options.
Well,
He's
hold on,
present.
hold on. The so Genesis 1:3, right? Let there be light, right? I believe it's Genesis 1:3. Genesis 1:3, let there be light, right?
Yeah,
Right.
it's the creation narrative all around. So
Okay. So prior to that utterance, right? Because we're just gonna assume that, I don't know, some kind of a metaphysical mouth is saying or doing something what you and I would consider talking or speaking, right? So that utterance of let there be light, right? So there were things happening, right? If we're going to speak, temporally here, right? There were things happening prior to that statement. Would you agree? There were things being described in the Bible, because we're at Genesis 1:3, right? 1:1, 1:2. There were things being described prior to that statement. You don't open the Bible and it says God said let there be light. That's not the first sentence in the book, right? So if there were things happening prior to that utterance, what I'm talking about is, in that infinitesimal, we'll just say nanosecond, just whatever we can, you know, imagine, right? That tiny portion of time, we'll call it, prior to let there be light. The omniscience right? The ability of the omniscience, under the definition that we just agreed on, knows I'm going to state this, going like next, coming up next. This is something I'm going to do, right?
yes,
So
yeah,
so when okay, great. So when the deity gets to that next nanosecond, just prior to doing that, he's right
hmm
here, just before he does that, he can't change his mind. Because if
Well,
he
so
did
for
some,
example,
well, hold on. Let me finish the thought. Because if he did something different, if he said, let there be barbecues, right? Then back here, he would have foreseen, I'm going to want to say, let there be light, but I'm actually going to say, let there be barbecues.
okay, but it's a little bit of confusion of categories there. So if he,
Okay, go
so
ahead.
you are applying in the description of the scenario, you are applying temporal descriptors. You are describing, okay, he is at this point in time prior to him choosing.
Prior to letting there be light, that's where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so prior to letting there be.
But you and I are saying prior, right?
We are saying prior, yes. And when we describe God's actions as in like a prior or after, there's two facets to that. There's our side of our perspective, and we see what God does temporally in the created order. And then there's what God has done or does or will do, because those are all relative terms to God on his side of existence. So again, if he chooses to act like, I mean, I'm using anthropomorphic descriptors. You have to, because we're human and we're finite.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So if that's the language that we're using, right? Because we have no other options other than to use that language. So we don't get to use that language like, oh, prior to let there be light, but it's not actually prior. It's actually simultaneous. So it wouldn't make sense if it
prior,
was.
It's prior insofar as the timeline exists. Okay, so if you read, for example, you go to John 1, okay, and John 1 describes Christ. Okay, now I'm not digressing too far, but listen to how it speaks. Okay, so in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. So it's giving a temporal kind of progression, chronological progression to something
even the Bible, even the Bible is using the temporal reference in the beginning.
Yes.
Why even say the beginning?
Because it's relevant to us. So, for example, a characteristic or an attribute of God is that he will condescend. So if he condescends to his creatures, naturally he has to condescend in a finite way in which we can interact with them.
Okay, but hold on. But here's the problem, though. But because I feel like we are digressing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Did the statement "Let there be light" happen while there was already light?
No, because that's a temporal progression.
Okay, so again, before.
Oh,
prior,
you mean the actual written recorded statement, like Moses?
No. That's low hanging fruit. No, what I'm getting at is the deity makes that announcement, "Let there be light." Is that announcement being made in darkness?
Yes.
Okay, so darkness becoming. See, we have to use temporal language. So darkness changing, becoming, altering light. When we put that on paper, you have to say there's a period of dark where it was not light, and there's a period where there is light. And by definition, the dark would supersede the light. So I don't know how you're looking at that as like, there's no time. So that's why I asked. Are you saying when the deity said, "Let there be light," there was already light? Because that would be nonsensical, right? So there's a period of darkness and then a period of light.
Yes. But the period, so for example, there is also the other aspect to that. When you're saying there's darkness prior to light, the let there be light it's not just saying like the physical act of creating light, sun, thermodynamics. It's also saying a cessation of existence, a non-material temporal existence into something that does exist. Like Acts, I believe it's Acts, it's Romans. I think it might be Romans. I always get these two mixed up where it says the God who creates out of nothing. So that is a portion of that narrative in Genesis, like 1:3, 1:4, 1:2, wherever exactly it is. It says create light. It is not just simply saying like there are things that exist and then God creates light. It's also saying that there's something that does not exist that's coming into existence. So that also would include, for example, timeline. So when
Okay.
God creates internally from outside of the timeline, he also creates the timeline from which within he creates sun, thermodynamics, and so on.
Okay, but again, prior to creating a lollipop or a universe or a human or a goblin or this conversation or whatever it is, the atom, whatever it is, this is the God, and prior to them, the God creating any of that God knows ahead of time, right? Because there is no time. The God knows that it's going to do that thing, correct? It's going to, it knows in the scenario with the grocery store, it knows I'm going to go to the grocery store. It knows I'm going to spill. It knows I'm going to look silly going around the aisle and investigating where's the sugar coming from. And it knows all of that's going to happen prior to, correct?
Anthropologically speaking, yes, but at the same time, because God is eternal and he is timeless, and it says, for example, that Christ was crucified from the foundation of the world, these things to God he doesn't progress towards their occurrence. He's always all encompassing through everything that has ever existed ever. So
Okay, but hold on. Creating the earth, right? There was a period when there was no earth within your theology, correct?
temporally speaking, yes.
What other speak would we use if either there was a point where there was no earth? Would you agree?
Yeah, temporally speaking, yes. But that's why I make that qualification, because if we're asking those kinds of questions, they are temporal questions, yes, but to God, they've always existed. He's all encompassing of the whole timeline. They've always existed to him prior to them actually tangibly existing, because he's
So
there, he's present.
okay, you're saying the earth has always existed within the God who created the earth.
Insofar as he is eternal and timeless. Okay.
Okay,
So that
but is that a yes or a no? Are you saying that the earth existed inside of your deity who created the earth?
no so with
Okay.
that kind of a phrasing it that kind of way will lead to some kind of a heresy down a particular road. It's not that the earth existed within God. It's
Okay, what are you
that
saying?
God exists throughout the timeline. So
Right, it created the earth. Right.
God is pervasive through time and outside of time, but the earth and the timeline is not. If that does that make sense?
No,
I mean,
sir.
that's okay. Well, I think it's an issue of eternality, timelessness. God has never not existed, but the world has. Okay, so excuse me, all reality. So God has always existed, reality has not always existed. Reality has been derived from God. God has created reality out of
Created it.
nothing.
So right, so there was a
Hmm.
period where reality did not exist.
Yeah. So, I mean,
So
does that primarily resolve that contention, or is because I
no,
think
so
that's
we're about to go over time.
yeah,
That
we
takes us
will.
back that that takes us back to square one, because my
Mhm.
whole position is I'm going to create the earth or I'm not going to create the earth, right? Prior to doing either of those, your God knows I am going to create the earth. My whole thing was when he gets to that moment, however you want to define the word moment, temporally or atemporally, right? Um, your God could not have done otherwise if it in fact knows it is going to do it.
So that's also like in our discussion, our text discussion, that's also an issue of aseity. God is the only non-contingent being. God is utterly free and sovereign to do whatever he wants. So even upon his own will, this is the issue. This is where I was hitting on when we were talking about things.
Yeah, but
The circularity of the bottom circularity of certain facets of reality. So let's say you talk about contingency and or dependence, causation and effect. Okay, you follow that, right? Like, let's say soft determinism. Every decision you make is impacted on something else. God is the only one who, even his own omniscience, does not impede him or affect him or cause him to do something else. Let's say, oh, I know I'm going to make this decision, right? As God, I know I'm going to make this decision. And then we like anthropologically say he progresses to that point where he's going to make that decision. He can't not make that decision because he omnisciently knows he's going to. Well, then again, it's a confusion of categories almost. It's like it's playing paradoxes against one another. So you have the paradox of insofar as we can understand it, it's a paradox of omniscience, and then you have a paradox of eternality or timelessness, and then you get to that point, you kind of put them against each other. You can't quite do that because at the end of the road, God is present when he makes the decision. He's present prior to making the decision. Both of those points in the timeline, he's present in. And so whatever he does, he chooses that all the time. I mean, that's like the.
But no. Because hold on. What you just said is you're making it sound like, yes, my God is forced to always do the same action, but he's choosing to be forced to do the same action. I mean, Malachi 3:6 says, I am the Lord, I change not.
Yep.
Right? But then I think what in Ezekiel 32:14, it says, the Lord relented of the evil he thought to do unto his people.
Yep, and Exodus, I think it's Exodus 34 or could be 32 or 34 where he's going to go and destroy the Israelites for building a golden calf. And Moses prays on his behalf, and he relents. And
So which is it? Does he change, or does he change his mind, or does he not change his mind? In your view, does your God make choices, or is it irrelevant and there is no period of indeterminacy? It knows what it's going to do, and it's acting upon that forethought.
Both.
That foreknowledge.
Yeah, it is both.
Is it both?
In one sense, it is both. Because,
sir, saying it's both, you've come on, you're basically telling me that I can't even think of any. It's like a married bachelor. You're saying that the deity is a married bachelor.
Married bachelor. So, for example, with that kind of a phrase, you are crossing two categories that cannot intersect. They are exclusive in their own. You're saying he's married and he's a bachelor. Those contradict one another. That's my buddy Andrew would remember that's a law of non-contradiction.
Yes.
So you can't do that because they are corresponding categories. They're like the same category but denoting two different sides of the equation.
Right.
Okay. When you see that God relents or change his mind, okay, that is an anthropomorphic description of what, for example, Moses or Ezekiel is observing, because he does operate and is receptive to individuals within temporal reality. But his decisions that he makes, and this is the hinge point, is that from his eternal sovereignty, God makes whatever decision he's going to make, and he's ever present throughout that temporal material condescension with his people. That's why prayer matters, because let's say, I'm not going to pray today for God to heal.
Hold on. I don't want to get into prayer. But you're saying
very crucial. It is very central to the actual question, because Ezekiel and Moses, as you demonstrated, as you brought up, they interacted with God and requested basically for him to relent, and he did upon their prayer. Now, would he have?
But you just said, with the omniscience, he would have known ahead of time that they were going to be in the situation where they needed to pray, and that he was going to do the thing that they were praying for. So it's, prayer is like asking a movie director to change the ending of a newly released movie for you. An outcome that you would prefer. If there's a divine plan and everything's supposed to work out in a specific order, you're basically saying, hey, I have some edits, I have some suggestions, I have a better plan than what you intend to do. You want to take me up on that? Yeah, Luke Skywalker is going to keep his hand, and he's gonna fly away in a Dodge, Hellcat or something at the end of the movie.
Sure, but that analogy disregards both true omniscience and true eternality, because number one, A divine plan is not a divine plan is only its connotation is only a fixed reality in so much as it pertains to us from our side of the perspective. But when that God's divine plan, it includes all of our prior and future prayers, requests for him to intercede, and so on. It's not he doesn't ignore us within his divine plan.
Okay, Jesse, if I'm in my car and I'm making a left turn, am I ever able to surprise your God?
No.
Okay. So your God already knows I'm going to make that left turn.
Mm-hmm. As well as if you pray to him.
And if I said I'm going to make a right turn, he actually knew I was going to want to make a left turn, but I'm going to make a right turn. There's no way to surprise your God. He already knows ahead of time before I even get in the car that I'm going to go down that road and make that left turn and get into that car accident, right? And then when I get in that car accident and my child's in the back seat and she's like bleeding out and I'm praying for her to survive, he already knew that we're going to be in that situation where I was going to pray where he could have stopped the car accident, right? But rather than stop the car accident altogether, I get in the car accident, the child's bleeding out, I do the prayer, then the God saves the child. So it's kind of, if it's part of the plan for me to just play it out and be under the impression that I'm choosing to do these things, but it's actually just playing into the overall plan. I mean, it's kind of a little silly, isn't it? I mean, that's what I'm getting at is the omniscience is that this is going to take place and that nothing, you can't deviate from it because then you would have foreseen that you were going to deviate from it.
Say that one more time, the last part.
Okay.
No, just last part. I don't need you to rephrase it. I was listening to. I just missed the last thing you said.
Yeah. Okay. So, I said, if the God knows that left turn turns into accident, child bleeding out, prayer happens, then the miracle happens and the child survives. And you said prayer matters. What I was
Why
getting
didn't
at
he
is,
stop the car accident in the first place, right?
well, no. I'll let it go. I'm gonna let that go. Okay. What does it matter? The child's saved now, right? Right. It's all good. So that's where we are, right? I'm just happy my child's good, right? So backing up, before I put the shoes on, before I buckle her in the car seat, your deity knows that's awaiting down the road. There was no other way. There was nothing else ever going to occur other than what it knows it's going to. What it knows is going to occur.
What he knows is going to occur. Yes, that is correct.
Right.
That is
It's not.
within his
It's not going to
omniscience.
happen that we get in the car accident and I'm bleeding out and my child's praying for me. It's not going
No,
to be
if the
flip flopped or
scenario
anything else.
within God's omniscience is that he knows that the child is going to bleed out, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Correct.
But when you
So what I'm saying is there's no that's so in our minds we're choosing to go down the road and we're choosing to make the left to go to the ice cream store. And the other driver is choosing to text message and veer into my lane or whatever the details. We're all choosing. But zooming out, your deity knows exactly that accident was going to take place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm getting at is if the future, so to speak, look, we'll stick to humans. If the future of the humans is known ahead of time and the prayer is going to be a part of the plan, then what is the point of the prayer to begin with? Because you're not persuading the God to do something different. It was part of the plan that you would do this.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I
So
mean,
you agree?
if you so I don't agree that prayer is futile. Okay,
Is prayer part of the plan?
prayer is part of it. So depends on how you describe plan. Okay, prayer is a part of prayer. Well, again, like what do you mean? Do you mean omniscience? Because if the plan is the divine omniscience that I'm going to pray, then yes, God responds within his omniscience to your prayer, but he's not contingent upon the prayer. He knows you're going to pray because he's in a relationship with you. Those that are in relationship with God depend upon God and recognize that, okay, he knows that let's say I'm going to the store or let's go with that scenario, okay? He knows that I'm going to pray once my daughter's bleeding out,
He
okay?
knows you're going to pray, and he knows that he's going to have to fix everything. He already knows all that's going to happen before you get in the car.
Mm-hmm.
If he
But the
knows he's going to have
prayer
to fix everything. Okay, go ahead.
the prayer is a dependence upon his good omniscience. Okay, it's a dependence that though he knows exactly what he's going to do or what he's not going to do, it is a dependence upon him that he is good and that he is going to interject, right, anthropomorphically as we see it. He's going to interject into a situation that we didn't think he would prior. But nonetheless, the point of omniscience, if you're not confusing categories, is that whatever he does do or does not do as your prayer is involved or not involved in the situation is inevitably what was going to take place. Okay. But temporally,
Right.
you have to keep those divisions between his eternal omniscience and your temporal actions. Just because you're like, okay, well, he knows that I'm going to pray. So why don't I just let's just say temporally that I'm just going to rest upon his omniscience that I was going to pray, and then I'm just going to alter that, and then I don't have to pray. Well, then what's the case? Well, what's the case within his omniscience? Did he know that you were going to pray, and then you caught his omniscience off guard because you didn't actually pray?
Right.
Or was his omniscience that he knew that you were never going to pray in the first place because you're trying to trip up his omniscience, and then it's not really omniscience? So
Well,
which way
here's
is
the
it?
thing. Just like you said, making the left turn, there's no way I can surprise your God. So whatever I fucking decided to do, if I decided to not pray and see what he does, or pray, it's all part of, he already knows how everything's going to play out. It's his movie. He's made the movie. We're in the movie. But we're the actors thinking that I'm choosing to pick this up and smoke it, but that was part of the plan prior to me even existing and having this conversation with you. You know? So the other thing, the whole reason the omniscience came up in the other discussion was because I said, given that I'll just say your deity, your God, creates the earth, and we agreed there was a point where the earth did not exist, reality did not exist, we'll say. Reality as we know it did not exist. When your God is going to do that he knows ahead of time that he's going to, without time, we'll just say he knows he's going to do that.
Yes.
He couldn't say, although I knew I was going to create reality, I'm not going to create reality, because he would have known he's not going to create reality.
Yes. That's actually pretty spot on, but
Correct.
Yeah.
That's my problem with the omniscience.
Well, sure, because you're temporal, because you're thinking in order, you're thinking in chronology. You're forcing a chronology upon something that doesn't have chronology.
I'm saying the ability, by definition, that, because remember we started off defining what it is, right? The ability itself says anything that's happening or going to happen. We don't have to add time to it. We can just say anything that's going to be in effect, I know of it. I'm the causer of it, right? So when at that point, when I cause it, I can't do anything different other than what I know I'm going to do. Because if I did anything different, I would have known I would do that. So to say that, you can't have the cake and eat it too, basically.
That's a logically coherent way to look at it and describe it. If you now, you have to be careful of saying like he couldn't have done anything other than what he had foreknown he would do, because you're doing several things by doing that. Number one, again, I know you said like, okay, forget the chronology aspect of it, but again, you are imposing a chronology upon an eternal being that was present prior to doing it. He's present while he's doing it. He's present after he's done it. He's present through the whole thing, and whatever he chooses to do, you can't really describe that anything can be forced upon him, because he is choosing to do it.
Well, that's why I asked you. That's why I asked you. Did light already exist at the time that he said, "Let there be light"?
No, because light is a temporal issue.
Uh-huh.
Now, you're asking the question, see, that's the thing. You're asking the question from the perspective of God's omniscience or eternality.
Right.
So now I didn't catch on to that initially. Okay. So if you're saying it from that sense, again, that is the paradox of eternal omniscience, eternality, omniscience. Okay, so
Right.
to God, it has always existed. Okay, but the default baseline way that we communicate with one another is that I'm going to tell you no, it didn't exist, because that is when you read biblical narrative, like
Sure.
95% of the time takes place within normal human ways of talking, normal human expressions.
I
And
get what you're
so when
saying,
they,
but hold on. I don't want to go too far from that point because that was very juicy right there. It was very, very, very juicy. So we agreed that if you and I are God, right? We're God. Light has always existed. For the humans, it's just
not objectively,
right, right. But for us being a deity, we're a God. Light has always existed. But for the humans, it's gonna, it's just some brand new stuff for them. But for us, it's always existed. Now, here's the thing. The Bible says God said, let there be light. But the Bible doesn't say, even though light has always existed, right? It says, let there be light. But God doesn't say, let there be God, right? Even though God's always existed.
yes,
Why isolate light, which has always existed? And even though God is
light has
new for
not
the
always
humans,
existed. Run.
go ahead.
That's again, that's not using the proper categories. So it's not that light has objectively always existed, because what is light? Light is material. It is, well, okay, not like physical. I mean, it's a thing that exists within
Well, yeah,
material reality.
there's particles, there's atoms. Yeah, light
Yeah,
is physical actually.
it is present. Okay, so light
It's
in of
physical, yeah.
itself as object, it itself has not always existed. God has always existed, and God transcends time. So God is present when the light exists. Okay, and so you can say prescriptively that basically light has always existed to God. But objectively, if you're talking about objectively light as an object, as a thing, that's not God, you're not talking about God and what God's experience could be. You're talking about light. Light has not always existed. If you're talking about God, God is ever present when light does exist, but light was created out of his ever presence.
Okay,
Okay?
so again, this is why I wanted, because I think we're getting into a little bit of word salad. So this is why I asked you in that specific way, where I said, was either, no, I don't know if it's a dichotomy or a trichotomy here, but there was no light and your God created it, or there was always light and your God's just shared it with our reality.
The former
Right.
is correct, the latter is
Okay.
incorrect.
Okay. So in the Bible, when it says God said, let there be light, right? He's sharing the light. He's not creating the light.
You say no. God created the light out of himself. Like God created light out of nothing.
Well, hold on. It's either it always existed or it's being created.
No, I've been rather consistent. I'm not saying that. I've never said that light has always existed. What I'm saying
Okay.
is, if you were talking about God's eternality, okay, God's eternality, you're talking about God's eternality as the object, not light. God exists throughout anything that ever will or could or was existing. Okay,
.com, right?
that doesn't
But
mean that light existed at one point prior to its object material presence. Okay,
okay,
light didn't exist. Light then started
there. So
existing.
there's a point where light didn't exist, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. There was a point where light didn't exist whatsoever.
Yes.
Okay. So, see, I feel like we just did a big circle because I know you said you don't feel like you were being inconsistent, but that's kind of how I took it. When we first started and I said Genesis 1:3, I can't believe how over we went here. But
Yeah, I told you we would go way over.
I can't believe it. But you know, there's people still in here. Nobody's bored yet, so I guess, you know, that's great. I do have some other things I'm supposed to take care of, but um, if when we started, I said Genesis 1:3, right? That your God said, "Let there be light." So I'm reading into that as, okay, this is creating light. That's why I got into the whole, there was a period where it was darkness and then there was light. And then you went into the temporal, boom, boom, boom. And he said, but for God, you know, it's always existed within him. That's
Well,
why we went
okay,
down the
no,
rabbit hole.
I don't mean like spatial categories, particularly. I mean within his divine attributes of eternality. Like, I don't mean like literally light existed as an object, as a thing inside of God. I'm saying that with regard to God's, specifically his incommunicable attributes, those things that will exist, he is present when they do exist and also when they do not. And so he's present, like it's not a timeline. It's like he's just there. Like you can say, okay, timeline is timeline. Right here, this is where light exists. Let's just say, right? Okay, he exists prior to it, after it, in the middle of it. So with regard to God's eternality, he's present when light exists, and he's always within that whole timeline. You can't say that he was at not one point but at another. And so to him, yeah, sure, it always existed to him, right, as an analogy, right? I'm saying that not literally. I'm saying, like, you want to say, oh, it's kind of like this. Okay, it's kind of like it always existing for God, because God has just always existed and been present in any moment of time. And so when light exists, he is there.
I don't think you're attempting to be intellectually dishonest. I'm not gonna make that accusation. I'm finding a lot of difficulty with establishing either there was a time where there was no light, or light always existed. Can we differentiate? Because I was trying to make a point, but I couldn't even get to the point because we couldn't get past this
because a lot of these things, I've had a lot of these discussions, and a lot of the things a lot of these discussions become very, very difficult because you're not defining, like, not you, but people in the conversation. They're not defining their categories and their categories well. So that's why I have to say that like. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so I'll try to do some yes or, because I really got to get going here, but I'll try to do some I'll try to do some yes or no's, and of course there's I don't know. So don't feel like you have to be Mr. Rain Man with the answers. Okay.
Yeah.
If it's an I don't know,
let me give more option to those three options you gave me. I'm going to say nuance, because if you ask me a question that necessarily crosses categories that can't be crossed, I'm going to have to say nuance, and then I'm not going to go into it today, so you can get off the live stream.
I see.
But
so
there has to be.
If it's a malformed question, then you'll object to the form of the question.
Yeah, I don't like playing cat and mouse. I would prefer to be able to give you a straight answer, but some things, if you're talking about specifically the more essential attributes of God, a lot of those things are by nature, as we perceive them, circular and paradoxical.
Well,
so
let's
test
the blood. Let's test the blood. So do you exist?
Yes.
Okay, and how do you know you exist?
I know I exist insofar as I am reliant upon my sensory faculties, my intellectual faculties, to affirm that I exist.
Could your sensory faculties be flawed?
They could be, but I do not have more data that be the case than I have data that says it's not.
So you know 100% absolute certainty that you exist, or you assume that you exist?
One nuance on that one, because 100% certainty is what the omniscience of God, right? So I am certain I am as certain as I can be within my means.
So you believe it, but you don't know for sure. You believe it, but you don't know.
I believe it. I live it out and act on it.
So that would have been, so again, so that's why I wanted to test the blood. So when I said, do you exist? You should have just said, I don't know. Right? Because it just came down to, I don't know for sure. Okay. So here's the actual question I want to ask. So, was there a point where light did not exist?
Yes, there was a point where light did not exist because the object in question is light.
Okay. So now that we've confirmed there was a point where light did not exist, that would mean, based on the light that's in my room, there's a point where light started to exist. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. In the interim of the 2 points, here, your God, with the omniscience that we defined, knows it's going to create the light. Would you agree?
Can't agree on that. That it requires nuance. You're applying temporal categories to an eternal, timeless God.
Okay.
You can't do that.
But from point A to point B, light or no light in light,
Mm-hmm.
your God knows there's going to be a point where there is light.
You could say that. I think that's a reasonable thing to say, insofar as insofar as you don't trace into other problems. But
We
that's
aim to
fine.
please. So, okay, so I try to stay in my lane, bro. So I'm just trying to keep it as logical as possible. So we go from no light to light, right? However that happens, right? We go from no light to light. Your God knows that's going to be the case, all right? Andrew, I appreciate that. On the page, the One Good Reason. I don't know if you're watching from Jesse's page or from my page. I hate to deviate. I'm sorry, Jesse. You're able to go to the video section. There is a very detailed discussion about the origin of choice. We get to a point where I agree with that person, or they agree with me, I should say, and we kind of derail and then go into omniscience. I don't know why we did that, but there's a part in there where we go into omniscience, and that's what Jesse found issue with. So that's why we're doing this talk, ironically. But I would ask that you watch that video. But let me go back to the point here before I lose my train of thought. So we've agreed there was a point, no light. Your God knows there's going to be this point where there is light. We agree on that, right? He said it was a reasonable train of thought. Okay.
Yes.
So here's where I have the issue. If your God knows there's going to be a point where there is light, when that point begins, as far as we can understand it. No problem, Andrew. I appreciate you. Thank you. We will look at that and say, okay, your God knows there's going to be a point where light begins. Just at that point, your God could not say, let there be fart, right? Or create fart. Your God knows the light would begin at that point. Nothing can surprise your God, as we've gone through a few demonstrations.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so we agree. So you and I agree on this. I don't
Agree,
know why
but
we're debating
I'm
this.
not
You and I
backtracking
agree.
over some of the necessary qualifications of that scenario. I'm not backtracking, but tentatively, I'm agreeing
Well,
with this right now.
well, tentatively, as in facetiously, or you legitimately think it's a
No,
logical motive?
you could say, like, right, no light.
Correct.
Okay, there's a point where it doesn't exist, there's a point where it exists, and you can say, if you wanted to pinpoint a point within God's eternal, ever-present, like, timeline that doesn't apply to him, that he knows that he's going to create light, then yes, he knows he's going to create light, and that's exactly what's going to happen, because that is within his aseity.
God's we'll call it God's time. We'll call it God time. We'll call it omni time. Okay, we'll call it omni time for the nuance of this conversation. We'll call it omni time. In omni time, 0 to 10, right? Your deity knows at 6, light happens. At 5, your deity can't say fart will happen and not light. Because it would have foreseen that
can't,
That's
well, hold on. You can't say that you can't, because you can't make his omniscience contingent upon the occurrence. You're taking an event and you're attempting to say that his omniscience is contingent upon that occurrence because it's within his omniscience.
well,
But
the
that's
occurrence
it.
is it's its own action. It's its own action.
It is its own action and nothing.
Right.
So whatever God chooses to do within his eternal omniscience, omnipotence, that's the only thing that ever could occur. And you can't say that
Correct.
there are any other possibilities outside of that because he is omniscient and eternal. So you can't
Correct.
say then he is, but you can't say then that he's at a crossroads and he couldn't have chose something that he wouldn't have chose because that non-choosable possibility is not a possibility because it
Right.
lies
It's a one
back
way. It's a one way street.
outside.
It's a one way street. There are no other options. It's a one way street.
Okay, yes. Yes.
That's my whole. That's my whole problem. So we finally get on the
Why,
same page.
why is
That's my
that a
whole
problem?
problem. If you have
Are you,
no choice to do anything, hold on. If you have no choice to do anything else, you don't have free will, sir.
okay, so you're arguing hard determinism.
I'm not arguing hard determinism. What I'm saying is, by definition, the way that the attributes of your deity, the way we've described it and defined it up to this point, that we've agreed just 10 seconds ago, that your
Uh-huh.
God could only do the thing that it knows it's going to do. There's a one-way street.
So if you're applying that, if you're taking that, and then you're saying, okay, then there are no other possibilities within
I'm not
our
saying
world.
I'm not saying whether I'm saying if that is the way you're describing your deity, because this is we're talking about your God and what you believe in. If this
Okay,
is
then when I
we're on God's
describe to
street
my
and
God and
there's
what I
just
believe in, you have to give me the room to explain that as I so
okay.
choose, because you are giving me certain boundaries that I answer for
Well, we're
you.
using definitions.
I
We're using
give you proper
definitions.
room.
Because
So,
if we don't use definitions, then I can say bat, you say bat, mine flies, and yours hits a baseball, right? We have to eliminate any equivocation. We have to get to what we're talking about. So that's why we defined it in that way, and we've agreed
so
up to
if
that point. I don't see why we're having a
well, are you taking? So you're taking basically God's omniscient eternality, and you're applying that. You're applying that to human experience, right? In insofar as you're saying, okay, then what happens within the timeline as we experience it? Nothing else could have happened within that timeline as we experience it, right?
not for us. I'm sorry. I don't think you're intentionally doing like a red herring, but I want to go back to we're talking
Yeah,
about your
I'm
deed.
just yeah. I don't know if
We're
you
talking,
are. I don't know if that's what you meant by that question. Okay, then nothing else could have happened, or if you're still strictly within like God's being, not
we're in
applied to.
we're in omni time. We're in God's actions, right? In the order that God does the actions, right? Created the light, created the earth, created the humans, whatever, right? In the order that God's doing things, right? The light's up next. We're gonna do light. I can't do fart. That's the point where I do light. I know I'm gonna do
Sure.
light then. We agree,
Okay.
sir. We agree, and it's not
To
like
an
a
extent, yeah.
loss or any type of. We agree.
To an
It's
extent,
by
yeah. But
definition.
I mean, I do appreciate that we do agree, and I
Okay,
will
so
still qualify that with I think we agree to an extent because when you say that he cannot choose anything else, okay, you are when you're saying within his omniscience he can't choose anything else, you're
well, hold
naturally
on.
bringing
Wait.
in this
Well,
specific
by
there
definition,
could be
choice,
something
right?
else.
Choice. Well, choice is selecting between two options, right? Or more. But
Yes.
at bare minimum, choice is selecting.
Mhm.
If you have one item, one event, one phenomenon, one thing, whatever word you want to use, the solo endeavor, there are no options, sir, by definition. But we agree on that.
Yes, we do agree on that. But so I made this distinction with you a couple days ago when we were talking is like so both the options and the choice reside within God. So his omniscience it's almost like
You
so
can't
if
say
he knows
choice
he's
though.
going
You
to
have
do
to be
this and
careful.
he
You
can't
can't.
do that, it's almost like a logical fallacy. When you're saying like okay, well God knows he's going to do this and he can't do that, and you're saying he can't do something. Well,
Right, because he
that's
knows
just
what he's going to do. Because if he was
like
okay, look, if I were to humor what you were saying, okay, just because I really feel like we're making a lot of great progress here. I really do feel like this was a great talk, and fuck it. I'm gonna stay. I'll stay on a little bit longer. Okay. Because if well, you know what, this is actually really good. So I'm gonna stay tuned in here. Okay. If we just agreed that your God knows what it's going to do, and you said, well, that's a problem. You can't say he can't do this other thing. The problem is, and now we're kind of going into the topic of choice, right? But so I don't really want to do that because that's like an hour conversation. But just surface level choice, right? You need at least two options. There cannot be a period of indeterminacy, right? Your deity already determined what it's going to do.
Yes.
So the choice would not be a factor, sir. By definition.
No, because you're making his omniscience contingent upon his omniscience. Like, I mean, you have to that's why I'm saying, like, utter sovereignty. I know, I understand. Believe me, I understand this. I understand why you're getting frustrated with this, but this is a very legitimate philosophical.
I want to stick to the terms. If we're not going to agree to the terms, the definitions, then I might as well be speaking in different language.
We're talking about the terms and the definitions. For example, when you and me are talking, there are certain, like the law of non-contradiction, there are certain terms and definitions that apply to us that we cannot do. So like God crucified his son on the cross and redeemed his elect. Okay, that's not a thing that he is going to, like, he made the choice to do that. That's within his foreknowledge. That's what he did. It occurred. Okay, could he go back and, like, completely undo all of that, even though it was in his omniscience? No, because it's in his omniscience. You just can't place. Yes, I agree, but you cannot.
So what is the issue that we have? I thought we were going to come into this conversation and you were going to be like, I don't agree with that. But you seem to be a logical guy, and you've come to that same conclusion.
Because the ultimate problem is you can't make, like I said before, omniscience contingent on omniscience. When you say, okay, he can't do something that he chose not to do,
by definition,
it's because that option is not within his omniscience, because he was never going to do it. So it's not an option. All of the options, as I've said and I've clarified,
correct.
All of the options and all of the choices are within him. There's nothing that.
But there's no period of sure. But there's no
forces.
But do you agree there's no period of do you agree there's no period of indeterminacy? There's never a point where God doesn't know what the fuck. There's never a period where God doesn't know what he's going to do.
Yes, this is correct. Okay, but what he's going to do is
choice is contingent upon indeterminacy.
Say it again about indeterminacy.
Choice is contingent by definition, unless we're talking about a sauce or a dance or something else. I'm talking about choice. Choice is contingent on indeterminacy.
Yes, insofar as we experience,
deity is never, by definition, never indeterminate, then choice is never a factor.
It absolutely is a factor. He chose to create, did God have a level of indeterminacy prior to him creating light? Okay. No, because timeline of creation doesn't apply to him.
But you just agreed with me a few minutes ago, a few times, and then now I think we're diverging here.
Because when
it's giving me pain. It really is. It really is giving me pain. I thought we really had a good track of choice necessitates indeterminacy by a conscience for a free personal agent. It requires indeterminacy. It does. Now whether the future, whether reality is actually governed by determinism, save for any quantum indeterminacy. Regardless, we're under the illusion, or in my view, I rarely do this, right? But in my view, we're determined to act the way that we do because of our brains, right? We're under the illusion that we're choosing, but we're actually influenced by our surroundings and the way that our brain is actually developed, right? But in your view, the deity, you're saying the choices are inside of the deity. The choices are, I'm trying to use your language, right? So the choices are inside of the deity,
and options. Choices and the
but
options are within his eternal sovereignty. So
but
you
that's
cannot, you
automatically,
can't.
it's automatically saying Coke and Pepsi, Coke. It's automatically doing that because there's no period of indeterminacy. It knows it's going to drink Coke. It knows it's going to make Jesse. It knows it's going to create the earth. It knows it's going to flood the earth. It knows these things. It doesn't have to decide, should I flood the earth or should I not? What factors should I weigh out? There's no period of indeterminacy. By definition, choice is not involved, right? Unless there's some
So,
other definition of choice that you have, I'd be glad to hear it. But this is what I
so
do.
no,
This is what I do at home.
well, no, I agree with your definition of choice, and that there is an indeterminacy approaching that point of choosing between two options. But there are certain categories that, like, if you read the biblical narrative, there are certain things that you recognize that God has to be, and then there are certain interactions that people have with God that show that, oh, well, it makes you ponder, it makes you question. Okay, I prayed to him and he responded to my prayer. Which did he know? Whether I was going to pray or whether I was not going to pray.
But it
Like,
doesn't matter because
if,
Malachi 3:6, I am the Lord, I change not. He was going to do the thing he was going to do.
yeah, now, and it primarily that verse, while it's like doctrinally exactly as you stated, it's also contingent on the former half of that verse, which says, "You, O Israelites, would have perished long ago if it were not for I, the Lord, who does not change." Okay, so there is a larger context to that passage, and that passage is specifically talking about whether or not the Israelites were going to be destroyed. Okay, so now, again, if you want to reach into the theological, philosophical, and that's where we're going to stay, that's fine. Just remember that verse is not taken in isolation. So, yes, God doesn't change. Okay, he's
Right.
not going to change within his omniscience, but his omniscience is free. It's not contingent upon his own omniscience. If there are two choices, and within his omniscience he knows he's going to choose that, and I said omniscience does not limit omniscience, you can't say he's forced to choose option A over option B because
No, no,
he's
no, no,
free.
no, 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 no.
He
The
made that
issue is,
in
the
his
issue
own.
is, the issue is about 15 minutes back. Okay, somebody can timestamp it. About 15 minutes back, or maybe 20 minutes back, I said basically, essentially, what you're saying is your God is forced to do something, right? Because of its omniscience, it's forced to choose the thing it has no choice but to choose. How silly is that? I mean, the wording of it is, I'm choosing to be forced to choose.
Because he freely chose it.
Because
You
he
see
was
what I'm
forced
saying?
to, he was no, he was forced to freely choose. He was forced to freely choose it.
No, well, he wasn't. See, that's the thing. This is
Right. So
the paradox.
it's
It's circular.
that's why we
So
need
you're
definitions,
understanding it,
sir.
right? You're
That's
understanding.
why
You'd agree that
that's why we
this
need
is
definitions.
paradoxically circular, right?
Right. It'd be ad
Okay,
infinitum.
that's the point. Is that his omniscience is not contingent upon his own omniscience. Within
But
his
it's
omniscience,
contingent
what
upon
he
the definition of omniscience, right? Knowing everything.
say it again.
His omniscience is contingent on the definition of omniscience, right? I mean, knowing everything. Otherwise, why use
Yeah,
the word?
insofar as we understand it. But again, when you apply temporal categories, if there are two options and you know he knows he's going to choose A, if omnisciently he was going to choose A, he had to choose it, that's fine. But then you're sacrificing an other equally necessary doctrine of aseity, and utter sovereignty and free will. When within his omniscience of knowing what he's going to pick, okay, that's not forcing him to pick what he, right, prescriptively knows what he's going to pick. These things are naturally circular and paradoxical in an intentional fashion, because if they're not, then you have something lesser than the highest definition of what God is. So I
Andrew,
understand where this is irritating, but that's the best that you're going to get without actually being God. So
and
one of the
the
verses is our
best that
God
I'm
in
going to
heaven.
get, I mean, that's,
Already pleased.
but the best that I'm going to get is not good enough, in my opinion. But Andrew, Andrew asked, does choice have indeterminacy as part of its definition? Now, I preference that with a conscious, free personal agent, right? Because you could have a machine that when you put the quarter in, the arm goes up and selects the Coke and brings it down and gives you the Coke, right? It's selecting between multiple options. but it's not a conscious free personal agent. There's no period of indeterminacy. It's determined it's going to grab the Coke because you have forced it, right? So that's the difference, you know. So there's choice, and then there's the free personal agent who has a period of indeterminacy. There cannot be a period of indeterminacy with omniscience because you know everything, including your own future, including your own actions. So choice and omniscience are mutually exclusive. They would not be. Can both of you
Yes,
give
if
an
you were
answer to
talking
that
about
question?
anything.
Jesse, go ahead and address Andrew's question if you want to scroll just a little bit. The longer this video is, though, the less people are going to want to watch it because, as you mentioned in the beginning, the video was lengthy.
If God is all things, is that including us?
No. It's he said, does choice have indeterminacy as part of its definition?
Okay, I thought he was referring to the comment directly above him. So does choice have indeterminacy as a part of its definition? Yes, I think so, but this isn't a specific category that I've specifically researched, but that's also only applicable to us. Again, we're not eternal, we're finite. So then if you want to take a definition, you want to flesh out a definition that we would agree upon this anthropomorphically, as we are a finite being. You want to apply it to God, you can't quite just transfer that over. You want to answer that?
Oh, I answered it first, and then you answered. Because I said I prefaced that with a conscious free personal agent, and I compared it to like a Coke machine, something selecting. It's selecting between two or more options, but it's being forced to do it by my quarter being put in the machine. It was determined to follow the order of the mechanism to select the Coke.
Which almost then makes it not applicable because the machine is contingent upon you, who actually is making the choice.
Correct. I'm the free personal agent in this scenario. Well, set determinism aside, I might be determined to select the Coke based on my influences and everything.
So that's weird.
But anyway, ad infinitum. But in that case, I mean, I'm the one with the brain at least to differentiate between the Coke machine. So what I'm getting at with your God is I was almost trying to put your God in the same category as the Coke machine. If the Coke machine is omniscient and knows it's going to select the Coke, and it's not going to select Pepsi or Mountain Dew or whatever, Mountain Thunder or water or anything else, it knows it's going to select the Coke, right? Then there's no choice involved.
Again, you have to apply nuance with these issues, okay?
Well,
If God, there is a theory. When you have something, remember, I've admitted to you, right? I said, or I didn't admit, I asked you, you understand that this kind of a conversation on omniscience is inherently paradoxical and circular, and you said you agreed,
yes.
Right? Okay, omniscience is inherently paradoxical and circular. You can't make his own omniscience contingent on his own omniscience and say.
I think I agree with it's inherently paradoxical. I agree with it's inherently paradoxical because you have mutual exclusivity, you have contradictions, but circular, I mean, I wouldn't allow it to be circular. I mean, I would say it's paradoxical is what I would say.
Well, I mean, I agree, but I'm just saying it's circular in the sense that when you try to go down that road, and if you're only looking at
defend it,
and you say that he knows he's going to choose one thing, the other side of that where we kind of began this discussion on is that I was mentioning, I need to plug in my phone. Is that I was saying is that the other facet of that is eternality, is that his omniscience is not so contingent on his omniscience because whenever he's approaching the point of making a decision between two different things, and you say, like, as you confessed, make the best analogy for that is that he's forced to do one or the other because he knows what he was going to do. You can't say that because he's making that choice at every point in his omniscience because he's eternal and he's ever present throughout the timeline.
Right. So
you
right, but by the omniscience, the choice was made prior to him being in the period of indeterminacy. There was never a
Yeah.
period where he had to select. It's set up straight away. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. And then it makes you think. You could have had an argument when you came in here. You could have been like, oh, my deity put all of these options on its own yellow brick road. So it wanted to eat a toaster strudel and then go to bed and then get in the car accident. It created those events in its own future, or its own actions. It created those events. It placed them into its omniscience, right? It created the events that would take place in its omniscience. But to do that, to choose to do that, it would have had to foresee that it would choose to do that.
Yes, and that's the circularity of it.
Which is the problem that I have, sir.
I know, and that's fine because you're trying. I mean, you can have that problem. I understand the problem. Okay, logically, I understand that it's a problem insofar as you attempt to put certain categories and parameters upon something that's naturally you can't. It created categories and parameters. I mean, like, I understand that sounds like really. I understand that sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't. God doesn't play by the rules that He created us to live by. So the logic
play by the rules of His own abilities, His own attributes. What I'm saying is the omniscience, by definition, is a specific set of things, or one, it has a specific purpose, or however you want to say it. It's not
partly, yeah, but it's also more apophatic than it is cataphatic. You're not saying it is this specific thing.
It's knowing everything. That's the definition.
Yeah,
and in the Bible,
you are.
It says in the Bible it says He knows everything. So that's the definition.
Making an analogy, Solomon. I mean, I'm making an analogy. I agree that it is a affirmative cataphatic kind of a assertion. Okay, that omniscience is this thing, and this is basically its exhaustive knowledge of all things that was, is, or could be. But it's more apophatic than it is cataphatic. It's saying, okay, we understand what temporal reality looks like. We understand what finite knowledge looks like. Okay, whatever is the most transcendent form of finite knowledge, that's exactly what omniscience is. Okay, so that's why I'm saying when you get to certain categories and you try to say, okay, whatever was within his omniscience, and he knew he was going to pick this, then he didn't have any other choice, and so you're playing his omniscience against itself, and you can't do that because he's utterly free and eternal within his omniscience to choose what he wants to choose. Okay, so that's the thing. I mean, I'm just telling you, these are the categories that.
But there's no period of indeterminacy. So how can choice be? Can you give me an example of a conscious, free personal agent making a choice where there is no period of indeterminacy? Just one example.
Not that's conscious or sapient.
Thank you. No. We don't have to say sapient. Just conscious. If a thinking, intelligent. Can you give me an example of something that makes a choice, selects between two or more things, where there's no period of indeterminacy, and you can call that a choice? What's the difference between being forced to do something and choosing to do it? Well, you know what? Let's put a fork in this, and you're more than welcome to rehash a conversation with me about maybe the origin of choice, since that seems to be the crux of the matter with the omniscience. I think that's kind of how the omniscience was bled over into it anyway. But everybody, I appreciate it. I wish we could go a bit longer, but again, not everybody has the attention spans that you guys do. They'll see the video, see it's an hour long, and they're going to want to watch, cats playing on the piano. That's a 2-minute video or something like this. So I wanted this to be 10 minutes. I think I was fooling myself. There was no way we were going to get into omniscience and speak about it, for 10 minutes. But guys, I really appreciate it. Mike Carey with The One Good Reason. This is our guest, Mr. James Palm. If you want to tell them how to find your page or your information.
Yep. So if you go over to the Devil's Advocate blog Facebook page, you'll be able to find it. It's got a classic white and black Trinitarian symbol in the center of the main picture. So, but I will finish up. I appreciate the conversation. I understand this is not going to get resolved now, nor anytime in the near foreseeable future. been a issue that's been going on for 5,000 years. But I certainly appreciate the cordial conversation. And honestly, I would next, if we have another discussion, if we can do another one in the future, I personally would enjoy something that's not going to be so philosophically high, something that we might have a little bit more progression on, but this was very enjoyable. So I appreciate your time.
I appreciate your time. I actually do feel that we made a lot of progress because I think we agreed about 3 or 4 times. It was just the final head nod to let that go. Kind of, we ended up in a cul-de-sac, but no worries whatsoever. Everybody else, really appreciate it. You guys have a great night. Andrew, I appreciate all of your questions. When I get some free time, I'll go back through the comments, guys. If I didn't get a chance to respond to anything that was said, I will send you a direct message. All right. You guys take care. Enjoy your weekends, and happy Mom's Day to anybody that's a mom watching. Goodbye.
Thanks, Mike. Good night.
Night. I can actually back out. Look at that. Well, this is the after hour show. I'm hitting the finish button and it's not letting me back out. This is amazing. Amazing. How do I back out? Yeah, X, I tried to fucking close this thing. This guy, I can't close it. He's like, did you try closing it? you kill me, bro. Oh, this is gonna be the thumb over the camera. Hey Vlad, how's it going, man? I'm trying to close the freaking video. It won't let me close the video, bro. Won't let me close it. Oh boy. Let me turn it sideways. Rotate your phone. I wonder if I just this is crazy. I'm still live right now. I wonder if I just close Facebook, if it'll save it. Hey, do you guys know if I just close down Facebook while I'm doing a live, if it'll save it, or if it'll just close the app? This is great. This is gonna be part of the fucking video. All right, I'm just gonna close it out. Fuck it.